Erev Tov. So last night we spoke a little bit about Rav Yisraeli. Yesterday was Rav Shaul Yisraeli's Yortzeit. We shared an idea, one of his halachic ideas. I want to share with you tonight something else from Rav Yisraeli, an idea which he writes related to the parasha, so maybe somewhat connected to what we said last night, but it's an idea which emerges from the parasha, and it's an idea which is particularly relevant and poignant for the time that we're in now. So, Parashat Shlach, as we know, famous episode of the spies. And the question that everybody asks, the great mystery, we've already discussed it somewhat this week, but the great mystery of this whole episode of the spies is, what did they do wrong? What was the problem? They were given a mission, go out, go scout the land, go see what's there, right? Read the psukim. וישלח אותם משה לעצור את ארץ כנען, ויאמר עליהם עלו זה בנגב, ועליתם את ההר. Okay, go up, and what do you have to do? עליתם את הארץ. מהי? What is it? את העם היושב עליה, חזק הוא ערפה. Look at the nation, that's the inhabitants. Are they strong? Are they weak? It's not their fault. They saw giants. That's who was there. They came back and they told the facts. חזק הוא ערפה, המעטו הם רב. Are they numerous or they few? מה הארץ אשר יושב בה, טובה היא מאה? Is the land good or bad? They come back with the grapes and the pomegranates and the bounty, and again, this giant fruit from the land of Israel. We still have today the Carmel winery, I think it is, the symbol, right, of the people carrying the cluster of grapes. That's where it comes from. Etc. Etc. So they're told, go out, scout the land, bring back a report. They come back with a report. Nobody argues the facts are accurate, 100%. Right, in terms of the factual accounting of what they saw in the land, who was there, what was there, etc. All of that was accurate. And the fact is, you have two groups within those 12 spies. You have Yoshua and Caleb on the one hand, and you have the other 10. But no one's disputing what it is that they saw. Of course, we understand that the problem is when you get to what's called the parshanut, right? The interpretation, the analysis, which is very, very different between those two groups within that group of spies. They both saw the same thing, but they came back with a very different analysis of it. You know, there's a famous story, maybe apocryphal, may have happened or not, but there was a certain salesman, certain company that sold shoes, and they were looking to expand their market. So they were looking to broaden their horizons. They sent out two salesmen to go and explore Africa, to see whether there was a market. They went to a certain country in Africa. The two salesmen they went on the boat, came back weeks later, months, whatever it is. The first one arrives, he walks in, he says the trip was an absolute disaster. He says, we're looking for a market to sell shoes. The people there don't wear shoes, they all barefoot. Let's forget about it, we can close up shop, it's not going to work. Next day, salesman number 2 comes back, and he's got gold in his eyes. He says, you don't know what I saw. He says, I went over there. He saw, the people don't wear shoes. They're barefoot. We'll make a killing. We'll make millions. No one has shoes. We can sell to everybody. So two people saw the exact same thing, but the analysis was completely different. The truth is, nowadays, you see the same thing as well. If you watch the news, which I don't recommend you do, but if you look at channel 12 or you look at channel 14, right, they'll tell you the same fact. Well, maybe, but even if they tell you the same facts, the completely different conclusions come out of it. One says we're losing, it's terrible, the world's coming to an end. Other one says don't worry, there's no war, nothing's happening. You know, it's so that's but where did they go wrong? The question is, and what is it in the psukim that shows us exactly what was the mistake of the spies? And Rav Yisraeli says the following. He says that there is one pasuk, which we see just a few words, which is a very minor detail. It's a side detail. You could easily miss it, seem somewhat trivial, but this contains the whole difference. This contains the secret to the whole story, to understand. And so he writes like this. He says, "Achen im nedakdek nimtza, sheben kol hapratim ha'objektivim shemasu," amongst all the objective facts which they came back with a report, Hitganev gam prat katan. There was a small detail which was swallowed up in that report. L'chora tztadi, l'chora bilti chashuv, seemingly unimportant. Olam mimeno mafteach lavanat ha'evdel b'halachat ha'netunim ha'mamshiyim sheben meraglim leven Yoshua v'Kalev. If we look at this detail, we'll understand where the different analysis comes from. And he says it's the following words. very small addition, but when they say, Vanehi beinenu kachagavim v'chein hayinu beinehem. They come back and they say, we were like grasshoppers, right? Vanehi beinenu. We were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so too in their eyes. How do you know what you were like in their eyes? How do you know how the other people viewed you? The point is that that's how they viewed themselves. And as a result, they understood that everybody else viewed them that way. He says, Adol, let's remember for a moment, because now we're in Sefer Bamidbar. Shmot was a long time ago. And now, this is where all the crises start happening, and the complaints, and one mistake, one crisis after another. But remember, this is the generation that came out of Egypt. They saw the miracles in Egypt. They saw Narot at Yam Suf. They saw the sea split. They heard the voice of God speaking to them from fire. This generation forgot who they were. These were giants of spirit. We're not talking about the giants that they saw. We're talking about them, the spies, the people. They were giants of spirit, but they start to disparage themselves. They forget their source. When they start to see themselves as grasshoppers, it's all downhill from there. It's all downhill from there. And that is why, because of that, as a result of that, right, if you see yourself as a grasshopper, obviously you're going to see everybody else as a giant. That's the way it is. And then he goes on and he says, I want to read you this paragraph from Rabbi Israeli, because he expands it a little bit, and it's a beautiful, timely message. He says, this was the chet. Habitul ha'atzmi, that nullification of self, that rejection of who they were and what they had and what their potential was. We'll see in a moment, not just them. He says, you've forgotten what it means to be a part of Am Yisrael. You've forgotten the power, the ability that you have in this generation. Right? Go back a few months ago, right? What was everybody talking about here? This generation is nothing. It's the TikTok generation. They can't do it, right? He says, it's that looking down on oneself that leads to the fear, that leads to the disheartenment when you come into contact with foreign nations and with foreign cultures. זהו שהוליד את הבעלה שלא יוכלו להחזיק מעמד שיעבור במגע עם בעיות מדינה. זהו שהוליד את השיטה שלא ניתנה תורה אלא לאוכלי המן ולאוכלי תרומה. This connects to what we said yesterday. Spoke about Rabbi Israeli's pioneering role in terms of Torah HaMedina, applying halakha, applying the Torah to the reality we live in today. He says this, in a sense, this was the fear of the spies. He says they didn't believe in themselves. They didn't believe in the ability of the Torah to be applied in every situation, every generation. Ein Torah nitna ela lo'ochlei haman. Right? We're in the desert. We're living in a supernatural existence of miracles. The Torah can speak to that, sure. We're going to come into a land. We have to work. We have to start with agriculture. We have to start working it up. We have to build a society. We can't do that. Torah doesn't speak to that. We're like grasshoppers. And he says, "Shechaye am normalim be'atzo be'echlech yaviu leplikat ol Torah." They said it must be. You're going to live. You're going to be engaged in the world and all these things. It's going to lead you to. You're going to be worldly. You're not going to be with the Torah. The two can't go hand in hand. We can't manage both. ואשר כן מוטב לשבת במדבר, לאכול את המן ולדחות את הכניסה לארץ עד אין קץ. And therefore they said to themselves, it's better, we'll stay in the midbar, we'll stay here, we'll carry on eating the man, we won't be engaged in any of the stuff. And that's what we can do, that's what we can manage. לא נוכל לעלות אל העם כי חזק הוא ממנו. He says, essentially what you're saying here, there's a lack of belief, not just in yourself. There's a lack of belief in the Torah, the God-given Torah, to be able to deal with the situation. It's a lack of belief in Hashem himself. He said, when the pasuk says, "Lo nochal alot ki ra'am ki chazak hu mimenu," what does mimenu mean? So Chazal tell us that it doesn't mean mimenu, not just us, but they were saying mimenu kivyachol. They're saying this, what's in there, this reality, this is stronger than he's capable of. And then he says, "Lo rak sipura mima shaval rotzeh Torah lesaper lanu." The Torah, as we know, doesn't just tell us stories. It's not just about what was once. Lo rak b'chiya ledorot mishamesh me'olazeh. This event, this episode is not just what's called b'chiya ledorot, it's called crying for all generations. Yoter ra'oi sheze limud ledorot. He says there should be something that we learn for all generations. Shebimei mivchan neda, in times of challenge, in times of test to our nation, certainly going through that right now, we should understand. לא לטפס לרגשות של ביטול עצמי או פחד מפני אפשרות עמידה במערכה. Don't give in to these feelings of nullification, of fear, of it's all overwhelming. And we've heard this, we hear this all the time. Be a war we won't be able to withstand, we won't be able to fight, we won't be able to do it. Well, he says no. שנדע שהייעוד הישראלי מודרך על ידי השגחה אלוקית. There is השגחה. Am Yisrael is part of something bigger, that's part of a bigger story. שאם גם מועדות ברוח האומה, even though there are ups and downs, תתחזק ותתגבר סגולתיות הישראלית. At the end of the day, the special nature of Am Yisrael, that is what will overcome, and that is what will succeed. So that was the mistake. He says that was the mistake that the spies made. It all begins that v'nahi beinenu kachagavim. We see ourselves, we don't believe that we have the potential, we don't believe that we have the strength, we don't believe we can withstand, whether it's literally on the battlefield or in the realm of ideas, in the battlefield of ideology, right? What we spoke about yesterday, I'll share with you one more paragraph here. This idea of Torah Medina and some of the foundations which Rabbi Israeli set down in the realm of, we spoke about police force and Shabbat and the Jewish state, etc. One of the things, he had a great argument in this area with Rav Herzog. And Rav Herzog, actually, when Rabbi Israeli was developing these realms and these halachot, he established a journal, and he went to the leading rabbanim of the time, and he asked them to write. So he asked Rav Herzog to write about bitachon apnim, about the police on Shabbat. And Rav Herzog comes to the conclusion that there are certain elements that we are not able to allow, we won't be able to allow it, it doesn't work halachically. Why? Not because theoretically it can't work, but because practically, he says the majority of the police force are not observant, so they're going to do whatever they want anyway, and that's going to mean that the certain heterim that we have, we don't have time to go into now, but it will become meaningless. And listen to what Rav Israeli answers back to him. He says it's impossible to look that way, it's impossible to consider that way. He says, there are many who have thrown off the yoke. Because they thought it's incompatible, it's inconceivable from a theoretical perspective for the Torah and the Medina to work hand in hand. That the Torah doesn't speak to this situation. He says, because people think, this is v'nahi beinenu kachagavim. People think that the only way that the halakha could work in a Jewish state is that if you have a Shabbos goy who's Jewish or not Jewish, whatever, but you have people who are not following the Torah, is going to allow it. He says that's not correct. Again, there's a lengthy halakhic analysis we've spoken about before, we can speak about again. But that is the message that emerges from all of this, not to see ourselves as grasshoppers, but to see ourselves in every realm as the giants that we are and the giants that we can be. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash אומר, "Tzakadosh Baruch Hu lezakot Yisrael, lefachach ba'alem Torah mitzvot, shnei Adonai chavetz man tzikoy yagdir Torah v'yadin."